Hello and thank you for watching. I'm Ashli Van Dyke, and on today's video, we have a special treat for you. Jeremy Thorne is going to join me to discuss all of the happenings at NCRA and how Eclipse has already changed based on that feedback. I hope that you'll enjoy this more casual discussion. Okay, today's video is a special video. This is going to be an NCRA follow-up video, and we're going to talk with our special YouTube guest, Jeremy Thorne, about all the things that he discovered, fixed, created, and made better due to the feedback of our users at NCRA. And I'd like to thank you, Jeremy, for stopping by our YouTube channel today. And I'm sure that everyone's going to love everything that you have to show us. So if you'd like to start and give us a little overview of the time that you had at NCRA. And first up on our agenda are bug fixes and enhancements to existing features. And Jeremy, why don't you go ahead and take it away?
All right, it's generous for you to say that these are discoveries. For the most part, what we're talking about here are things that were specifically called to my attention. That is to say, people said, hey, here's a thing that could work better, or here's a thing that I would like it to do that it doesn't do now. So let's start with the enhancements. And the first thing I want to point out is really important because one user came up to me bringing her computer and said, hey, look at this weird thing that happens when I try to convert ordinal numbers. And so if you can imagine, so I'm just going to type in a sentence with some more numbers in it. And let's do that. And so if that should have been, this is the 23rd time, what you would typically do is if you're using hyperkeys, you hit the Shift N to go to the number conversion hyperkey list. So this is a feature that's existed for a while. But one of the critical things in version 11 is that we've made a lot of these macros and macro groups much smarter in the plugin versions of them, because the plugin versions can do a lot of checking of context and say, what's going on in this sentence? How might I need to apply this information differently? But what somebody pointed out to me is that when they did ordinal numerals N here, so this item right here, then they were not getting it looking like this, 23rd. What they were getting was something that looked like this. Now, if you've seen that, then that's an issue that has already been fixed. And what was causing it is that is a code that the system uses for the extra ordinal formatting. Now, somehow this made it through like a year's worth of beta testing with nobody ever telling me this was a problem. So my guess is either not very many people use this feature or it just fell through the cracks somehow. So extra ordinal formatting, if you turn that on, what happens is that an ordinal number will look like this instead. You get the superscripts. Now you'll just notice that I used the hyperkey to do that. I used the plugin to do that. As soon as somebody pointed out that it was putting that XORD in brackets, I had it fixed in 10 minutes. So these things are very easy to solve, very easy to fix. And it occurs to me when part of the reason I heard about this is that I was told that sometimes people will go looking for solutions outside of Advantage Software and say, hey, I've got this weird thing happening in Eclipse. What's doing it? And they'll get a workaround that doesn't actually solve the problem. My understanding is that because we've replaced a lot of the macros with plugins, some of them still need some adjustment. And some people have been given the advice to put the old keyboard macros back, and we're given a workaround to put the old keyboard macros back. Well, please don't do that, because if you just tell me there's a problem, I can fix it. I can give you a fix, and then you still have the better, smarter Python macros. So let me show you two things. First of all, if there's a question of, okay, well, how do I get the fix? And the way you get the fix is if you go to Support Plugins and you go to Manage Plugins, one of the things in the plugin manager is a button that says System Update. That updates the plugin system, which means that all of the built-in macros, and this dialog even as part of the plugin system, all of the built-ins all get updated to the very, very latest. And that fixes a bunch of the issues that people have brought up. Actually, there aren't many. I've got like 4. So this is one of them, the ordinal formatting. So let's take a look. By the way, I want to point something out, actually. When I say that the new macros are smarter, I want to show exactly what I mean by that. And I'm going to show a sample using a keyboard macro. I'm just going to assign this to, let's see, what a lot of people have is the like Alt 1 through, yeah, there we are. Oh, it's already there. Alt 3 is the macro to insert comma, comma. So let me go ahead and do that macro. I'm going to hit Alt 3, and it puts comma, comma. Now that's a keyboard macro that's existed for ages and ages and ages. Now I replaced that with a Python macro. And what the Python macro can do that the keyboard macro can't is it can be context sensitive. And so if I'm here and I hit Alt 3, notice it put comma, did not put the initial comma, and it capitalized the Y and U. Likewise, if there's already punctuation, or if we are at the end of a paragraph, it puts comma. So it saw that there was already a punctuation mark there. So it knows whether you want punctuation before or after. It can deal with the capitalization. Even the simplest of keyboard macros can be improved by turning them into a Python plugin. So that's what we've done. We've gone through hundreds of the existing macros, including all of the real-time ones that you hit from your writer. Keith Vincent and I went through those one at a time, and we rebuilt them as Python code that is even smarter. So especially some of the more complex macros, like the find and change macro, much, much better as a Python macro. So please don't put the old keyboard macros back. If something needs some adjustment, just tell us and it can be fixed. Now, let's take a look at some of the other fixes. There's a brand new plugin called the Fed Rule Formatter. Let me show you what that does in case you haven't seen it. If you need to put a federal rule number anywhere in your text, in fact, let's go ahead and take a look at this. If I go to the plugin manager, we can see that there is a federal rule formatting plugin, which I have downloaded and I've enabled. And it shows me that there's actually two macros that it creates here. One for formatting a federal rule in real time, one for formatting it is as a hyperkey. I'm going to do the hyperkey because that's the one that I made the small change to. So what it expects is it expects you to write digits, then letters, digits, then letters, then digits. Now you can stop at any point. So you could just write like digits, letters, digits, because basically the rules either have additional parts or they don't. And so here it's showing you that, for example, 12b3a7 becomes 12, lowercase b in parens, 3 in parens, capital A in parens, and 7 is a Roman numeral in parens. No number conversion feature is going to do this. This had to be a plugin. And 5b23, also 5, parens b, parens 23. So this is the idea. It takes a sequence that is very easy to write, digits, letters, and you hit one stroke and it does all this formatting for you. So I showed this and then very quickly somebody pointed out, oh, I was trying that out and noticed that it wouldn't undo. And so now this is the very newest version of the plugin. If I do, so let's do 12b5 3, and then I'll just let's do D8. There we go. So I'm going to, let's see, I don't have a hyperkey for this. Let me go ahead and make one. And I'm just going to use, I personally, when I'm testing out hyperkeys and macros and so forth, instead of trying to come up with a new keystroke for everything, if I just want to try out a macro, I tend to use a throwaway command. I use Control-Alt-T for test. And I just replace it over and over again when I'm testing a macro for the next one I'm testing. And so we're going to look for federal rule formatting, which is going to be, it's going to be format federal hyperkey. There's the one. So I'll hit OK and OK. All right, so if I'm sitting on this word and I hit Control-Alt-T, it formats it. If I hit Control-Z, it undoes it. So the enhancement to this feature was that the one that was out there originally, Control-Z wouldn't work. You couldn't undo it. Now you can. Small change. It took me 10 minutes again. And as soon as somebody pointed it out, bam, it was fixed. And here's another thing I want to point out. So the core plugins, the built-in macros are updated by using the system update button. However, a lot of the macros that you see in my list are they're extra plugins that are optional and you have to go get them. And where you find those is under support, under plugins, under the plugin store. The plugin store will show you a list of all the plugins that are available. Here's all of the plugins that are available to download. And let me sort those alphabetically. And we'll see that federal rule formatting is there. You can see this is version 1.2. That's because it now has the update in it that supports the undo key. So when you say there's this plugin that you'd like to have an improvement to, what will happen is I can make a change to the code. I'll run it by QA. They put it on the store and it has a version number update just like that. So that is the federal rule formatting is one of the things that has been changed. Let's take a look at the next one is the exhibit tracker. So let me show you what this was designed to do and then how I improved it based on the feedback at the seminar. So here's what this is designed to do. I'm going to start a virtual real-time translation with some existing notes, but just imagine that you're in real time. So you're writing, blah, blah, blah. Here it comes. Now, you want to mark an exhibit. Typically, what you'll do is you'll write a dictionary entry that looks something like this, auto include EX mark. Now, the way that this was set up, this was one of Keith Vincent's ideas, and the way he typically does exhibits is he writes a mark stroke, and then it stops after the word exhibit and waits for him to write the number. So you write EX mark, then you go ahead and write the exhibit number on the steno machine, and then you write a stroke like typically what people put is something like was, which was defined as was marked and received into evidence, period, close paren, new paragraph, right? So you have a separate stroke for let's finish the parenthetical. And we're still going to do that. But instead, what we're going to do is, so first of all, you have the auto include EX mark, and then you have, because you're about to write an exhibit number, and because by default, digits will appear in as a word from 1 to 10. We're also going to put in a little number trigger here. All right, so we've told it to mark an exhibit. It brings in the automatic indexing line and all that good stuff. And now it's just sitting here waiting for me to write the number. So I'll go ahead and say, let's put number 4. So we're up to exhibit number 4 now. And I'll hit enter, and it's now you would normally write was to say was marked and received into evidence or whatever your particular verbiage is. But instead of doing that, this exhibit tracker, what it expects you to do is write a macro. And you can see if I look under manage plugins, we'll see that the exhibit tracker has in it instructions saying to use finalize exhibit to finish the parenthetical. I'm actually going to just copy this. And so you'd make a dictionary entry that was whatever steno you want, written as finalize exhibit. And so I'm going to translate that here now. And when I finalize the exhibit, it does two things. It not only puts the marked close paren, but it also shows me in the upper left-hand corner, my last exhibit was 4. Now, the reason that Keith has for this is through the course of a deposition, you might be asked to mark a bunch of exhibits. And if they ask you, could you mark this as the next exhibit? You think, oh, the next, which one are we on? Are we on 5? Are we on 3? Are we on 2? It's easy to forget. So just being able to glance up at the top of the screen and say, oh, we're on 4, the next one's 5. Great. And so you can just do, so you've written a bit, you're on to the new spot. And you can just say, once again, EX mark exhibit 5 and continue. Now, so this is the way the feature is designed. It's the way it worked at the beginning of the seminar. And at least one person pointed out, well, what if you're doing both letters and numbers? And now I had a solution for that, but I didn't really like it. So after discussing it a little bit with the people there, I realized, hang on a second, the software should be able to tell if it's a letter or a number, which of course it can, because plugins are smart. So let's do this again. And I'm going to do EX mark. Now this time we're marking a plaintiffs versus defendants exhibit or whatever. Sometimes the one is letters, one is numbers, but we're going to mark an exhibit with a letter this time. So we write our stroke 4. Let's mark an exhibit that's going to be a letter, and I'm going to go ahead and make this. This is exhibit C, and so typically you would put one of your glue symbols. Now once again though, I'm going to finalize the exhibit, and now watch what happens here. I'm going to finalize this. And in the upper left-hand corner, you'll see that instead of saying that the last exhibit is C, it's saying the last exhibits, plural, are C and 4. So the last letter is C, the last number is 4. Now the reason, first of all, it's helpful for you to be able to glance up and see that you've got both of these. But there's also an automation step here. If you know that you just want to do the next one in order, and you can glance up and see that you've got the right one there, you'll notice that this plugin also gives you The other thing I wanted to point out here is that in addition to exhibit letters and numbers, if you mix and match, if you have an exhibit number that is a combination of numbers and letters, it will go ahead and mark that separately because it isn't really sure what to do with those. So you'll see up here, there can be as many as 3 separate last exhibits. If you do have a mixture, if you ever use a mixture of letters and numbers, it'll show that separately. Now, the point being, now this one can't be automated because it doesn't really know what the next one on the list would be, but it knows what a next number is and it knows what a next letter is. So if you have dictionary entries for automate next exhibit, or automate next exhibit letter, you can just hit that and it's just one stroke and the next exhibit is marked. So let me go ahead and say automate exhibit here. Notice I can just go immediately to automate exhibit. I write nothing else and there we are. And we get thereupon plaintiff's exhibit 5 was marked. The next, you can see up here, the last exhibit has changed from 4 to 5 and the whole thing was made for you. So that if you know that what you're going to do is just the next number or the next letter, just hit that one macro and you're done. Automate exhibit number, automate exhibit letter. So this is again, this plugin was made before the show, but at the show, there was feedback that gave me information about how people would tend to use this with letters and numbers and let me fine tune this even more. All right, so the next item on the list is find boundary problems. Okay. All right, so the next plugin that has had some adjustments is mostly with some feedback from Keith Vincent, but it's the Find Boundary Problems plugin. Now, what this does is it searches your entire dictionary looking for any boundary problems you have in your writing theory. Some people call these boundary conflicts, but people like to think about the fact that they like to write conflict-free theory. I can almost guarantee you nobody writes a truly conflict-free theory because of boundary problems. And I'm going to show you what I mean by that. If you go into the plugin manager, you can see there's a plugin called Find Boundary Problems. Now, this is different from most of these other plugins because instead of enabling it and having it create macros or put items on the toolbar or items in the menus, the Find Boundary Problems plugin is just a utility. You just run it. And in fact, it even says this, run this plugin as a utility. It does not add commands or macros. So if you want to do a Find Boundary Problems process on your main dictionary, you just go here into the plugin manager, you click Find Boundary Problems, and you hit this Run button right here. So this is going to say, show me all the boundary problems in my whole dictionary. I'm going to hit Run. It's going to churn away at my dictionary, and then it's going to give me this report. Now, because of the confusion with what a boundary problem exactly is and what it means and how to read this report and how to respond to the information, I've actually added this section at the beginning, and I'll zoom in a bit. This is a how to read this report section that goes at the beginning of every one of these reports. And it points out how it works. First of all, you're going to see a root word. That's a one-stroke entry in your dictionary, such as package. Then it's going to show you all the boundary problems that occur. So the boundary problems are, first of all, it's a combination of a two-stroke entry that starts with that word. So even though PAJ, page, is package, pajama is pajama. So it's a whole different word that uses that same stroke as the first stroke. Well, this is pointing out that because you have this two-stroke word, we need to look carefully at, are there any other dictionary entries that start with MA? And could you be attempting to write package followed by ma something? And for example, here, this is showing, okay, well, you've got Marissa in your dictionary as Marissa. So if you were trying to write the package Marissa received, you would get the pajama because page followed by MA would be pajama. So this is pointing out that you have a boundary problem. Here's another example, pagination. So if you write PAJ followed by nation, if that's the word pagination, and you try to write, we can ship a package nationwide overnight. Well, you've just tried to write package nationwide, and you're not going to get package nationwide. You're going to get pagination wide, because page followed by nation is going to give you this dictionary entry you have. So that's what this is trying to point out, is all the different ways in which you could try to be writing one sequence of words, and you could get a completely different sequence. And it's not translation magic jumping in. It's not boost jumping in. It's not anything Eclipse is doing. This is just your dictionary. Your own dictionary has these entries that it can cause these ambiguous translations. So this is how you read the report. Now let me show you the actual report. So I even show examples here showing exactly what these mean. Now, there are 4 possible solutions, actually. I want to point this out before I go into the actual report here. So you could change the way you write the one-stroke word. That's a big change to your writing style, potentially. So it will fix all the problems, but changing your writing is a little bit difficult. The other thing you could do is you could delete the entries with arrows in them, which are either incredibly infrequent or really unlikely to be things that you're going to write often. So for example, this pajama example, like how often do you write the word pajama in a court case or a deposition? It's pretty rare. You might actually just set that one aside and say, you know what, I'm going to write that differently, or just delete it entirely. You could create phrases. So you could global package Marissa together. You could global package nationwide together as a phrase entry. Now, the thing is, if you take that approach, which, by the way, is the approach most people take when they're resolving boundary problems in their dictionary, which is how dictionaries get up to 200,000 and 300,000 words, because if you global every single boundary problem as a phrase, it's going to be a decades-long project of making your dictionary enormous and not necessarily that much better at translating. And the other thing is, honestly, you could ignore it entirely. If the phrase is very unlikely to appear, you could say, you know what, I'm never going to try to write that. That's just never going to happen. For example, package marathon. Like I'm having trouble even coming up with a sentence that would have the word package right next to the word marathon. So that one you probably didn't need to worry about. You know, that would be an example of something you would not make a phrase global of. So now that I've told you what the report should look like, you'll see that, and I've got, this is a fairly smallish dictionary. I've got a dictionary here that's a demo dictionary that I use that's only like 8,000 entries. And yet I have hundreds, thousands, not quite thousands. I've got 1,500 lines worth of report here. And so I can look through here and I can see, let me find a good one. Let's see. What I'm looking for is some nice common words that are likely to trip me up. Oh, well, here's a good one. Welcome. So if WEL is well, and WEL and the KOM is welcome, now we've got, if I ever try to write well before any of these other words, then I'm going to get a bad translation. Now, fortunately, well is a word where most of the time, if you follow it with another word, you're going to have a comma. But there's plenty of examples here where that's not going to happen. For example, you might say, well, you know how well complaints are handled here. There's no comma after the well in that. So that's going to come up with a completely bad translation. It's going to put welcome. So this is the one where I might look at this and say, do I need to write this word welcome differently to solve this problem? So basically, the way I would recommend reading this report is scroll through it, see if you've got anything that is potentially, here's a great one. Review is R long U, and R long U N is ruin. And so now we've got all these review entries where if I tried to write review, and then I tried to write the word after it, I'm going to get the word ruin, and then a bunch of nonsense. And you can see that there's quite a few of those that you think that phrase could actually appear. Anyway, so the boundary report is something that it already existed before the seminar. I've gotten lots of feedback about how to make it easier to read, put in the indentations, put in some information to point out how many entries there are, put in some arrows to clarify what it is, and added the how to read this report at the beginning. All that was added since the seminar. Okay. All right. So let's see what else we got here. Find boundary problems. All right. So that's the last of the fixes and enhancements. Now let's talk about the brand spanking new plugins that have been created.
And these were all requests of users at the NCRA conference?
Yes, 100% of these were all. So I did a 4-hour seminar just on plugins. Now I wasn't showing people how to create plugins. This wasn't a coding class. This was just me showing off what the plugins could do. Because even since the beginning of coming up with the initial development versions and the beta test phase and the release candidate. Just in that amount of time, people's suggestions came up, and I have written something like 42 plugins by the time this seminar started. So I showed them all 42 plugins. That was what I did at the seminar. And during that process, I asked if people had ideas. And so there were all these additional ideas and questions that came up. So let's start with the Clipboard Extender. This is something that somebody suggested. They were saying, can you write a plugin to? If somebody asks the question, can you write a plugin to? The answer is usually yes. I usually cut people off before I even get to the point where they ask the question. So they say, can you write a plugin to? And I just say, yes. What is it? What is the thing? Almost certainly we'll be able to get this happening. So if I go, I've already installed this from the store, but if you go into the store, you'll find something called the Clipboard Extender. The Clipboard Extender gives you a multiple copy and a multiple paste. And so it actually gives 3 new functions. Now I'm going to have to enable this. So I've downloaded this. I'm going to hit enable to enable it. That is going to make me restart, which is fine. I will restart Eclipse. So let me go look at this. Okay, Clipboard Extender. I have the Clipboard Extender. Let's look at the documentation to see what it does. That's the first place you should always go with the plugin, is click on it and see what the documentation here tells you. So this adds functions to the block menu for copy and paste, allowing for multiple clipboards within Eclipse. And so we've got copy stack and copy plus and paste plus. So it gives 3 new functions, not 2. We have copy plus and paste plus, which lets you pick which slot you want to use. And then we've got copy stack. This moves all the stored clipboards down 1 slot and stacks a new one on top. So you can use this to replace the standard copy command. So basically, if you replace your standard Control-C copy command with copy stack instead, what will happen is that every time you hit copy, it's going to remember the last 5 times that you copied. So when you hit paste, or rather if you hit paste plus, it'll say, which of these clipboards do you want to paste in? Instead of just pasting the last thing you did, which is what the normal paste will do. All right, so let's just look at these. So if I go to the block menu, we can see I've got copy plus, paste plus, and copy stack. All right, so copy plus and paste plus are very similar. They both prompt you and say, where do you want to put this? Or which slot do you want to use? Copy stack is the one that it's just like regular copy, but it moves the stack down. So let's just see, for example, if I mark some text here and I'm going to use the menus to show you which one I'm using. So I'm going to use, I'll just use copy stack, but that's the easiest one. So this is the one, if you want to use this, just move your Control-C command to copy stack instead of the regular copy. So I'm going to hit copy there. This also works for multiple lines or as much text as you want. So I'm going to copy a whole bunch of stuff. And once again, I'll hit copy stack. Let's go ahead and, hey, look, there's that number I put in earlier. Let's copy that, copy stack. So I have got a bunch of things on my clipboard now. I've got 3 different clipboards. And so if I do, I'm going to hit Control P here. If I do block paste plus, instead of just pasting the last thing I copied, it's going to say, which of these things do you want to copy? Now, notice these are the last 3 things I copied. There's the phrase, there's the beginning of that long block. It doesn't show you the whole block. It just shows you the beginning of it. And then there's the number I copied. These things, by the way, are things that I copied like 3 days ago. So it remembers as many as 5 clipboards indefinitely. Anyway, so I can click on these with the mouse, or I can just say hit 3 and it pastes in clipboard number 3. Or I can hit paste plus and say, I want clipboard number 2. I'll just hit a 2 and that's the whole big block. So multi-part clipboard. Now, if I mark some stuff and I say, if I mark something and I use the copy plus, this actually asks me, where do I want to put this? And so I actually might want to say this one should be clipboard number 4. I'm going to replace this one. So you can see this starts with then that. So I'm going to hit OK. And now if I go somewhere else and I use paste plus, we'll notice that there's number 4 is the one that starts with then that. So there it is. It's a multi-part clipboard for copying and pasting. I don't use these in any of the programs that I personally use, but I know people have said, this is kind of a cool feature that some word processors have. So I thought, okay, that sounds doable. And I was able to add that feature to Eclipse just as a plugin without changing any bit of the original code. Now you may wonder, is it possible to have more than 5 clipboards? Like maybe you want 10 or something. Well, you can do that. Now I'm going to show you a peek under the hood here. If I go to the Python code and I go to the Clipboard Extender. Now there's a whole bunch of awful, scary code, but there's one part of this that isn't quite so scary. Look at this, max clips equals 5. I could change this to 10 and then I would have 10 clipboards. Now, please don't change this to 100 because it will dramatically slow down this feature. You really only want a handful. I think 5 is plenty personally. If you want more, feel free to boost that number a bit. Just don't go completely nuts with it. But anyway, all right, so there's the multiple clipboard feature that was added. That was a user suggestion from the seminar. I said, sounds good, and that has been added to the store, I believe. Let's see, the next one, Suspend Suppress. This was really interesting. I'm actually going to point this out as a thing you might not know about the way Eclipse works. It's the kind of thing somebody would look at and say that's a bug, but it's not a bug. It's kind of an inevitable consequence of the way the features work. So let me. So here's the deal. There are several output formats. There are 2 output formats that support the apply edits feature. We have the cart window supports apply edits, and Bridge Mobile supports apply edits. Now, apply edits means if any part of the document changes, then the software is permitted to send the changes or send the text that is on the screen, usually the text that the cursor is on or the text you're writing. It has permission to send that text to the display to replace what is there in the same location in terms of time code or whatever. Now, here's why I'm pointing this out is because that feature has one kind of unintended consequence. So if I'm gonna do this with the cart window, so I don't have to set up a whole bridge session and throw up a browser and everything else. I'm just gonna do the cart window. So I'm gonna hit OK. I'm gonna start a translation, and I'm going to do virtual real time, and we'll do OK. Oh, there's my cart window. My cart window is off. Let's turn it on. Hey, there's my cart window. Okay. So now what we should have is if I go in here and make some changes, there we go. And you can see that the text that I've written changes right here because I have apply edits turned on. Now, the purpose of this plugin is to avoid this problem that some people have noticed, which is there is a feature in the edit toggles to turn the real-time output off, which means whatever I write, don't send it out. Now, if I turn the real-time output off and I write some strokes, notice how those are not appearing, right? I wrote this, you press Control-G once for each stroke, and it has not appeared here on the cart window. However, if I start writing, if I turn my real-time output back on again, so notice, you press Control-G once for each stroke, that text has not appeared on the display. If I turn my real-time output back on, it comes back. Now, you may be thinking, hold on, why did it come back? I told it I didn't. I told, this, you use this feature when you're going to write some words that you don't want to get output because maybe you're preparing job dictionary entries or you're practicing or you're checking to see if a series of words are in your dictionary. It's not something you want the viewers to see, but now it's just gone out where people can see it. And yeah, of course it's gone out where people can see it because you have told Eclipse to apply edits, which means that any text on the screen is eligible to be transmitted to the output. How do you prevent that? Little known feature, and that has existed in the system for a while, but if you start a print command, that suppresses the output for everything that's in the print command. So if I do PRT:comment, so if I have a dictionary entry, which is PRT:comment, just like that, it's going to start a comment line. Now, whatever I write in a comment line, notice, oops, I've got it. I had some delete strokes that got rid of my comment line. There we are. Oh, and now I've got a flipping
Your Q's and
new
A's are going to
paragraph.
do it too.
The Q's and A's are going to do it too. It is true. This, unfortunately, this sample job has a bunch of, has a lot of really short Q's and A's. Let me find, let's see. Let me go ahead and I don't know how long this paragraph is. Well, yeah, and it's also full of delete spaces. This kind of this sample job is slightly tricky to work with. All right, this one I might get away with. So, all right, here's the point I'm making. If you create a dictionary entry, which is in braces, capital PRT : comment, it starts a comment line. Now, it starts a comment line as though it was a type of paragraph. And if I write RealTime into that, notice that nothing that I put into the comment line is going up here into the output, even though I still have apply edits turned on. Now, I can continue writing, and as soon as it starts a new paragraph, as soon as I hit any kind of paragraph, it gets me out of this comment line, and then it starts writing up here again. Now, the beautiful thing about this is that even though I have RealTime output turned on, and I can edit anywhere in here and have that text go out. So this is an edit. So there we go. That went out there just fine. And I can edit before and after. That all goes out. Nothing that gets written on the comment line goes out. Now, that same thing applies for Bridge Mobile as well. The rule is anything you write in a comment line never gets output and never gets transmitted as an edit either. It's invisible as far as the viewers are concerned. So this was actually something I provided for a captioner. What captioners are used to doing is they're used to hitting a hotkey for flipping the RealTime on and off, which just goes in here and automatically turns this flag on and off. But that's not enough when you have apply edits turned on. So what I did is I created this plugin for Suspend and Suppress. And what this does is it creates some functions for toggling your RealTime on and off that also starts a comment line. And so let me go ahead and I'm going to stop my translation for a minute to get the cart window off the screen so we can actually see what we're doing. So Suspend and Suppress. So it augments the RealTime on off features to start a comment line when suspending and then start a new paragraph when resuming. Now, it's relevant for both bridge and cart. There are 3 macros included with this plugin. 1 to turn the output on, 1 to turn it off, and 1 to toggle it back and forth in case you want to use one command to do both. As a bonus feature, it adds output suspended or output on as an indicator on the info bar to make it more obvious when you have it turned off. So it adds these 3 macros: RealTime output suspend, RealTime output resume, and RealTime output toggle. I'm going to go ahead and define a keystroke for RealTime output toggle. And so let's go ahead and go into the user settings, edit keyboard. And once again, I'm going to use my test macro, Control-Alt-T, and we're going to make that RealTime output toggle. And oh, hang on, I haven't enabled the plugin. So where are we here? Let's go ahead and enable this plugin. Suspend and Suppress. It is currently off. I want to enable it. That's going to make me restart Eclipse. Whoops. Give it a second to fully exit. Okay. So in order to actually use this plugin, I'm going to go to Edit Keyboard. I'm going to check Control-Alt-T. I'm going to modify that to be my RealTime output toggle. Here it is. Look at that, RealTime out. So here's my new macros: RealTime output resume, suspend, and toggle. I'm going to just use this for toggle. All right, so now I can hit Control-Alt-T to toggle my RealTime output on and off. So let's actually show this macro in action. I'm going to start a translation, a virtual RealTime translation, and I'm going to start with RealTime on. Now we can see at the top here it says RealTime output is on. So if I want to temporarily suspend the real-time output, I'm going to go ahead and hit Control-Alt-T, which is going to say output suspended. And now we can see that everything I'm writing is going on a comment line. So it both suspends the output and puts in a comment line. And then when I'm done doing the things that I want to do here, I hit that same macro again. It turns the output back on again and also starts a new paragraph to get me out of the comment line. So this is something that, say, a captioner who was used to hitting F4, which is a macro to toggle the real-time output on and off, if they're using the cart window instead, or if they're outputting to Bridge Mobile and they've got real-time apply edits turned on, the toggle should be changed to use this macro instead, so that the going in and out of the comment line is handled completely automatically. So that's what this plugin does. It was to solve a problem that came to me from a captioner who was using a cart window, but I've also had the same issue come up from Bridge Mobile users. So anytime you don't want it to apply edits, this one step does the comment line and turns the output off, and also gives you the nice little indicator up here to remind you that your output is on or off. Okay, let's take a look at the next item. So that was the Suspend Suppress. Channel selectors. So channel selectors, this is a macro that was created for somebody who asked for the quickest way possible to deal with multi-channel audio. As in, they want to be able to play channel 1, channel 2, channel 3 with just a single hotkey. Now, obviously, there were some keyboard macros to do that, or people have made keyboard macros to do that. But I thought, yeah, you know what, that sounds like a whole separate category of things. So what this does is this creates a series of convenience macros for selecting and playing back specific channels. There's a play the main channel, which is the mix, or play channel 1, channel 2, channel 3 through 15. And then the menu version is for selecting a channel number. So if you do this often, but you don't want to have to come up with 10 or 15 different macros, you could just have a play selected channel macro, which is one keystroke, and it'll pop up the menu. So you'd hit that macro and then you'd hit a 3, or you'd hit that macro and then you hit a 6. It's still 2 keystrokes, but it also saves you from having to create, 15 different macros. Now, that's all this does. I'm not even going to bother. Well, I should go ahead, actually. I should go ahead and enable this to show you what it actually does. Is it creates a series of macros. So if I go back in and take a look now, if I were to assign keystrokes, then in the list of available functions that you can assign keystrokes to is, here we are. So there's a separate function now for play channel 1, play channel 4, play channel 8, whatever, however many channels you have. And so you would just assign keystrokes to each of these, and it would just play that specific channel. So very straightforward, not super complicated plugin, but it was something that I realized we didn't have. Somebody asked for it, and now it's a thing. So those are the channel selectors. All right, next one is the question and answer substitution for changing questions and answers to specific speaker names for easier writing. So this was an interesting one because this was a thing I didn't know anybody did, and maybe not very many people do it. But what one user told me is that when things are going completely nuts and somebody and some people are going back and forth really quickly, it can be easier to just hit question answer rather than hitting this particular speaker names, especially if it's an argument between two people. And so what this user asked me for is said, can I go back to that section later? And I say, in this section of like 3 pages of argument, can I just change all the questions to Mr. Smith and all the answers to Mr. Jones? Because really it should be colloquy. I just lost track, got blown away, and it's really easy to hit question and answer. I thought, yeah, that's perfectly reasonable. And that is something that, frankly, there's just no other way to do other than a plugin. So the way this works is, let's check the plugin. So this is called the Q&A substitution macro. And what it does, once again, I'm going to have to enable this. So it adds a substitution command to change question and answer paragraphs to specific speaker paragraphs. If a block is marked, it'll perform the operation on the block marked text. If no block is marked and you're in real time, it actually makes that substitution in the continuing translation. So in other words, you can say, at this point in my real time, please make my Q's all Mr. Smith and all my A's all Mr. Jones. And then you can just write Q&A. And then let's see, this is under format, under QA mode, under a command called substitution. So if I enable this, format QA mode substitution. So I'm going to enable, that will make me restart Eclipse. And now what I should see is under my format menu, there should be something called QA mode substitution. So this substitution command is what was added. Let me go back into that file. And I'm going to find a section with some Q's and A's in it. And so what we'll do, it'll say, all right, in this section, all the Q's should be changed to one speaker and all the A's should be changed to another. So let's go to format, QA mode, substitution. Now it's going to say right here that I want no substitution for questions and no substitution for answers. So I first need to establish what these should be. So I'm going to say the questions should be Mr. Mulligan, the answers should be Ms. Evans. And so once I've established what the Q's and A's should be turned into, I say do substitutions, and it will make that substitution in the entire marked block. There they all are. So if you use this technique of resorting to just hitting questions and answers on your machine when you start getting blown away, this is a really quick way to fix that in editing. Now, the other part of that, the real-time part of that, is if you don't have a block marked and you have a translation going, you can do that same thing. And when you hit do substitutions, it actually modifies the system to temporarily always replace question and answer with those speaker names. And then that's why this remove substitutions exists. When you hit remove, it puts your Q's and A's back to just being Q's and A's. Now, if you use this technique, I would like to suggest that this plugin be modified even more. And what I want to sort of throw out to the world there is think about what would it look like to do a substitution in real time, and particularly what would it look like to do it from the writer. So if you wanted to say, I can't write these speakers anymore, let's just switch to Q's and A's for now. Now here it's really easy because we're a menu and we can click and we can go to, you can't always do all this in real time. That's a lot of mousing around and choosing stuff. So can you imagine a way that this would make sense from the writer? Maybe you hit a single stroke saying, I would like to substitute Q's and A's, and then you hit a speaker number. So you hit Q and A substitution as one stroke, and then you hit speaker 3, speaker 7. So you just hit like macro 3, 7. And that would mean make the questions will all be speaker 3 and the answers all be speaker 7. So in 3 strokes, you would do this whole substitution thing for real time. That's possible. I can do this. And then there would be another stroke for cancel the substitutions and let me use my questions and answers for questions and answers again. I could make those real-time macros very, very easily. It would take me about half an hour to get that all tuned up. But tell me if that's something that sounds like something you might want to do. And if it is, absolutely, I'll do it. Very easy.
I think that that's something that we should highlight overall for part of the purpose of this video, is that these changes really are so fast to do now that we want to hear every possible suggestion and improvement, and we want to hear it as soon as possible.
Exactly. And this is the way that these plugins are typically going to work, is I'm going to create a plugin that has a particular piece of functionality, even though I know for a fact that it doesn't do everything everybody could possibly want. That's what makes it difficult and time consuming to write features, is if I try to anticipate every possible use case, it can take months to write a feature in a way that is complete. Plugins don't need to be complete. They need to be a starting point. And then people can come to us and say, this is the way I want to use it. And this is the way I want to use it. And we can make those adjustments as people actually need them and use them. It's very easy to try to write, or it's very difficult to try to write a feature that handles every possible thing anybody might want, because you spend a lot of time putting in features that nobody ever uses. So this lets us put in just the things people actually want to use, which is great. It means we can be super, super fast at getting this stuff done. So that was the Q&A substitution feature. The Automark Exhibit I have saved for last because it's fun and cool. So let me see here. All right, so Automark Exhibit. If I will need to enable this. Automark Exhibit is, the use couldn't be easier. I'm going to enable this, and it's going to add a single macro. It's going to add Automark Exhibit in real time for use in translation. So let me go ahead and enable that. Now, the idea behind Automark Exhibit is that unlike some of those other commands you were seeing earlier, where you have an initial block and a final block, and you write the number, and there's some fiddling and fussing to get to the process of fully marking an exhibit. I've basically had the feedback from a couple of users saying that, you know, sometimes they just hit a single stroke for mark that, and then they go back and fix it later. Like they go back and fill in some form fields, or, you know, whatever. Like sometimes you just don't have time to think about it. But what was pointed out to me is that, you know, when an attorney asks for an exhibit to be marked, particularly in a deposition, they will actually say something in the body of the text where they are indicating what they want marked. They will say, hey, could you mark this as exhibit 3? Or could you mark this as, you know, plaintiff's C or whatever, like, or we need the next exhibit marked. I think it's 7. You know, who knows what they say, but they're going to say the word exhibit in there somewhere, and they're probably going to say a number in there somewhere. And that's all we really need. Is this plugin looks at the text, looks at the entire previous paragraph, and it attempts to construct from that what exhibit the attorney was asking for. So I'll start a real-time job to show you what I mean by this. And I will then simulate an attorney asking for an exhibit to be marked. So let's see. Oh, hang on. Let me get rid of that cart window. Okay. All right. So I'm going to start a real-time translation, and I'm going to simulate an exhibit being requested by an attorney. So you're going on, there's questions and answers, etc. At some point, Mr. Smith asks, could you mark this exhibit as number 7, please? Now, here's the thing. That's there's no real standard for how they're going to say it or how it's going to appear in the transcript. Here's the text we've got, which is the attorney asking for an exhibit to be marked in plain English. Now, you can't necessarily predict exactly what he's going to say. You can't predict what the way that number is going to come out. You can't predict the order that the words are going to come out. But that's all fine, because what the plugin does is it analyzes the sentence and asks, does it look like this person was asking for an exhibit to be marked? And if so, let's automate that process. And so all we have to do is write a single macro. So you have a single stroke on your machine that does Automark Exhibit. And there you go, you're done. What this does is this looks into the prior paragraph and looks for particular patterns. And then you'll notice what it did is it put number 7 into the first available blank field. Now, in order for this to work, and the documentation goes over this, in order for this to work, you must have a blank field for the exhibit number letter with a variable assigned to the field. The commands above, what they do is they set the variable value and then fill in the field. So let me show you what my block looks like. And also the plugin also actually specifies what the, you must have a file called exmark.ecl. So you must have a block file with a particular name, and it's got to have a blank field in it. So my particular block file looks like this. So here's my exmark, and it's just this. And this blank field, you can see if I look at the field parameters here that it has a variable called exnum. So it doesn't matter what the variable is. The variable can be anything. The plugin will search for the field, look at that variable, set the variable to the correct value, and then fill in the field so you get the exact correct result. Now this, does it only work for digits? No, it doesn't only work for digits. Let's try another one. All right. So I'm going to try another sentence here, which is going to be plaintiff C. There we go. All right. Okay, so now I'm going to go to the automate exhibit, and it should be able to handle that. There we go. Now, this isn't magic. What it is doing is, if I take a look at the source code, I know I said I wasn't going to look at source code, but it's so much fun. Automark Exhibit. So I have a series of patterns that I'm looking for. And yeah, this looks super big and scary, but these are regular expression patterns, and regular expressions are a core part of a lot of features in Eclipse that have to do with looking at text and picking it apart. So what I'm looking for is basically the word exhibit or plaintiffs or defendants, possibly a number word, and then possibly a capital letter all by itself. So there's all these variants that it's looking for to figure out what to do with the text. So this is another place where I really, really want feedback from the field. If you try this feature and you find that it works most of the time, but there's some sentences where what the attorney has said isn't enough information, then let me know what the attorney did say, and I can look and say, well, can we create more patterns? I've only created 3 patterns here, and this still gets most situations. I would happily create even more patterns to try to sort of pick apart the way that attorneys ask for exhibits to be marked. One thing that's worth noticing here is that I did look for things like the word next, in case they ask for the next exhibit number in order. So okay, so here's a sentence where what the attorneys has said doesn't include a number at all. They're just asking it to be marked as the next exhibit. Let's see what we get. And there we are. It puts that in as exhibit number 8. Now that's just keying in on the word next. As you can see from my code here, I can see that next is one of the keywords I'm looking for. And I'm saying, if you see the word next, let's go ahead and just do the next exhibit number. So I'm happy to add as many little tricks to this as we can come up with for interpreting what the attorney has said. So this is an initial stab at a feature that was come up with as an idea by one of the people at the seminar, saying, couldn't I just hit one stroke and tell what exhibit number it should be based on what the attorney said? And it's worth a shot. It is. There's already quite a bit of progress made on getting that one to work.
And I certainly hope that we'll hear from our users and get more feedback about specifically that plugin and many of the others that are available in the store and that you've worked on since the conference.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so one final thing. I want to mention this because I didn't want to think anybody who made a suggestion at the seminar to think that I didn't get to their suggestion yet, because I've gone through every single thing that anybody brought up, whether it was in the seminar or if they came up to the booth and said they had an idea or a feature or an adjustment they wanted to see. I made notes of all of those, and I've made tickets for all of those, but I've only implemented about half of them. It's only been a week. One example of a plugin that was suggested is the find and change real-time macro, where you do like more mother fix, and then it changes the word more to the word mother because you wrote the wrong thing. Somebody brought up the point that they will often make the same mistake over and over and over again in a job. And it'd be nice to be able, instead of having to do that same sequence of 3 strokes, to be able to say, could you fix that word again? Now, I'm not sure what that looks like. One person said, can we just fix it forever? So that if you do like more mother fix, that you fix it every time. Well, but then you can't write the word more because every time you write it, it would always be the word mother. So what we have to think about is, what would this look like to have a memory and be able to retrieve that memory quickly? I'm not 100% sure what that looks like yet, but it's an intriguing idea. One thing it's possible is you could hit the fix again macro, for example, and it might show you a list of the last like 10 things that you fixed, and you could pick them with just a number. So that's only 2 strokes instead of 3, and you don't have to write the complicated strokes. So there's a possibility of that. In fact, I'll make a note here, maybe a prompt. So this is a request that came in, but I'm not sure it's a fully fleshed out idea yet, and I would love to get more feedback on that one. Here's another one that needs more feedback: an exhibit tracker that uses variables. Now, what this means is the Keith Vincent design of the exhibit tracker means you write a mark block stroke, then you write the number on your steno machine, and then you write a stroke at the end saying finalize exhibit. That finalize exhibit stroke is the one that puts the tracking information on the status bar. If you are going to fill in the variables in a form field, that's a different function altogether. And so in order to track that, since there's no macro being executed, we have to figure out, okay, well, during what process do I know it's time to update the variable on the screen? There's no real way to do that other than having a special command to say fill in the form field variable and remember it. So that's a separate macro, but I don't know that we want a whole separate, you don't want a whole separate command for just filling in form fields on an exhibit versus filling in form fields normally. So I'll think about that some more. For one thing, I actually do want to integrate this with the Automark and find out if the exhibit tracker and the Automark plugins could be merged together and talk to each other. Because maybe if you are automarking, that also does the tracking. Those really, I mean, just thinking about it, those two plugins are going to become one plugin very shortly here, I think. All right, here's another one. I resisted doing this offhand, but I think I'm going to put it in and see how people like it, which is the boost edit feature. Right now, it does not highlight any of the differences. Now, here's why this is important. I'm going to go back into a file here that does have some boost results. So here's the deal. If you're doing editing in a file that has boost edit stuff available, this is going to look for any differences between the text on the screen and the text in the speech results. And the speech results, if I go ahead and open those up, you can see that the speech results have a complete, basically draft transcription of every single word in the transcript. This is what the speech engine heard. And so this is what it's going to use. So this is what the boost feature will use to change your translation as it's going, if you're doing on demand or if you've allowed it to do automatic replacements. But even if you haven't done that, this is the information that the boost edit feature is using to let you select that information. So I'm going to make a mistake here on purpose to show you the main thing this does. If I have an error here, if I look up in the upper left-hand corner, we can see that the boost edit feature has seen the word that my cursor is on is different from the word that the speech engine heard. The speech engine heard the word promotional. And so it's telling me, hey, shouldn't this be the word promotional? And I look at that and say, oh, you're exactly right. So I'm just going to hit 1 and it'll fix it. Now, that feature is terrific when you can see that there's a potential problem. And if I go looking through the file, you can see that most of the places in the upper left-hand corner, it does not show me a replacement because the two are the same, right? So this is not showing me a possible boost edit replacement. But notice here, for example, healthcare law. The boost edit is saying, this should probably be 2 words. So the speech engine thinks that should be 2 words. And sometimes this is going to be sort of a judgment call. And here's my point. My point is, if I put in this feature, which highlights every single difference between what the speech engine heard and what you wrote, my suspicion is that there's going to be a ton of highlights. And some of those highlights are just going to be stylistic differences. Some of them are going to be places where, frankly, the speech engine is just plain wrong. Speech engines make tons of mistakes. And so every one of the speech engine mistakes is going to come up as a highlight saying, hey, did you get this wrong? When you got it right and the speech engine got it wrong. So I will put this feature in, but I feel like there's going to be situations where a lot of what it's going to suggest are going to be what we call false positives. Basically something where the program has jumped in and says, this looks like a thing when it's not a thing. And just be aware that what the feature does right now is it always calls your attention to where it might need an edit, but it doesn't do it by highlighting the text. It does it by when you place the cursor on a piece of text, it shows you up here, if there's a single word replacement, it'll just show you the word. Otherwise, it will say, there's a bunch of words here where the speech and the steno is different. Let's just pull up the boost edit dialog, and the boost edit dialog shows you the whole thing. And here's clearly an example where the speech engine just didn't know what to do with this name. So it's got a Hail Mary here. So this is not something that we want to change, and it is probably not something we'd want to have highlighted to call our attention to it. So I haven't made this a huge priority. I will add it in, and we'll just see if it's more annoying than it is helpful. Because just highlighting text doesn't it's not like you would have to change it. It's like the proofreader highlights. You can choose to ignore them. It's just if you mostly ignore them, then there's not a whole lot of point in doing it. So anyway, I will add that for sure. And the way it will work, by the way, is that the boost edit feature, even if you have the boost edit feature turned on, basically what I'm going to add is, in addition to the boost edit menu item, I'm going to add another menu item, which is boost edit highlight differences or something like that. Basically a button you would click to say, go through my whole document, highlight every difference. So it'll be a separate optional thing that you can choose to do if you want. All right, another one that somebody asked for was boost edit retroactive audio. Right now, boost edit only works if you did the job originally with boost turned on. Now you can retranslate a job with boost turned on and have it go through the audio, but that means you have to retranslate the job. So what would make the most sense is if we had a special feature whose really only purpose was to take the audio file and make a notes file out of it that boost edit could use. There's currently not a feature that just does that in the background without you having to go through a whole bunch of additional steps. So I'm going to try to make a way to make that happen. And that feels like something I could do in a plugin. All right, this next one, this one is my nightmare that I knew people were going to ask for, which is the exhibit labeler, the mouse-based dynamic resize while placing. So if you've seen the exhibit labeler, you've seen that you choose a PDF file and it pops up a preview of your exhibit, and you can move the little yellow label and stick it wherever you want. What was brought up was could we make it so that if you're cramped for space, you could make the label like small and wide and have it rewrap the text. And while anything is possible, that's the kind of thing that this feature request may be the most time-consuming one on this entire list. That one's going to take me several days, if not a week, because writing complex user interface stuff with dealing with all sorts of mouse drawing and dragging and reframing the text and resizing the text, dealing with font changes, dealing with margins, dealing with spacing, dealing with a preview versus the final PDF result. It's a it's a very simple request. It's a monstrous thing to actually write. And this is another reason we say, just ask us for any feature you want and we will put it on the list, because what most people are surprised by is some of the things that sound the hardest that you would think would be really difficult, I can do in an afternoon or a couple hours. Some of the things that seem the easiest will take many, many days, and this is one of them. So, let us make the judgment call. Just throw everything at us that you want us to do, and we'll put it on the list, and we'll do the easy ones first and get them out there, and then we will ponder when we have time to do the more complicated ones. And then finally, I only mention this because people did bring it up at the show, and this is really all about sort of talking about how the convention went, which is that one person asked for a couple of changes to the way the connection magic server is working, actually, which this is going to be a little bit tricky because we have to restart the server in order to make code changes to it. So this isn't going to be a right away thing, but I'm going to add these to a test development version and have the QA department look at it. One is that the request is made that if you have if you're doing Bridge Mobile and you are not requiring people to enter their name and email address, is there any way we can find out who they are anyway? And there's a limit to that, honestly. But the user who asked for this pointed out that it would be helpful to have their IP address. So can we collect their IP address from their machine and have that somewhere on the server to say, this person joined the session, don't know who they are, they didn't give the email, they didn't give their name, but here's where their IP address was. You might be able to tell from that where it is if you use some of the Whois services on the web. You can find out, oh yeah, that's an IP address owned by such and such a law firm, for example. So that's fine, we can do that. I put that on the list. And the other one, which is interesting now, please tell me out there in the world, please tell me if this sounds like a bad idea for any reason, but I think it's safe, which is somebody who is hosting a persistent session they would like for somebody else to be able to host that session on a different day. So let's say you're doing a trial that goes over several days. You do the real time on day one, and then on day two, you have a different reporter jumping in. You're using a persistent session name so that the attorneys joining in can use the same link. They can use the same link they've got in their email and just click on it and they'd be right into it. So it's the same session name, same password. It just makes a new document name. Really convenient for the clients. But currently the way the system is set up is that only the original host is allowed to continue a persistent session. Now, if the new host gives the correct password, should they be able to take ownership of that persistent session and continue it? So you do the session on day one, you give the name of the persistent session and the password for that to your colleague and say, here, you're doing day two of this trial, use this persistent session name and password, and you can continue on, and it'll be a new document on a new day, but everybody will be able to use the same link. I am currently prohibiting that. It's literally one line of code for me to say, no, it's fine. As long as you have the password, you can be the new owner. If somebody sees a security risk or a problem with that, let me know, and we will try to find a different solution. But this is a change I could make literally in minutes if it seems reasonable. So, all right, so that is it for our suggestions that came in from the NCRA convention this year. You have any other questions or issues or things that
you know
I've missed?
what? I was going over my own list of people
Yeah.
that I talked to, and there was one that someone did ask for, and that was an option to have punctuation go to the end of the current word instead of at the end of the previous word. That's how some other softwares that people have converted from work. And some people just kind of would like to have that functionality available without having to make a clunky keyboard macro.
Right. Interesting. That has plugin written all over it.
Yes. So I will make a ticket for that one, but I wanted to make sure that that didn't get, lost in the weeds.
Yeah, definitely make a ticket for that. It is possible with the plugin system, because one of the things that I did put into version 11 is in addition to plugins that create macros and things, like a lot of these things create macros or commands that are designed to be executed from the writer or from the keyboard. What you're describing, though, is you want the actual default behavior of the punctuation keys, like when you hit period or comma, just as a plain old what happens when I'm typing command.
Right.
You want that to do something different.
Yeah, and I know currently those are hard coded, if I'm correct.
Well, they are hard coded, asterisk, which is that the plugin system has a typing callback capability, which is to say, I can tell Eclipse if a particular plugin is enabled. What you can tell it is every time you press any typing key on the keyboard to type some letters, check with the Python system first and see if it wants to do something different.
That sounds perfect for this situation.
It is for exactly the situation, because every one of those punctuation keys, I can have the Python code say, hang on, let's add this to the end of the word. And then the Python code will send a signal back to Eclipse saying, I got this, you don't need to do anything. And
Perfect.
so it would then not do the regular punctuation-y stuff. So yeah, 100% possible. Make the ticket. I can have that one done in a couple of days.
Sure.
It didn't happen technically at the show, although it sort of did. We started the discussion while we were there and continued it for the last several days. Keith has been digging hard into the auto job dictionary feature. I don't know how much of that you've looked at, but
I haven't covered that one yet.
Okay, let me show you this because it's just bananas. I'm going to go to, I have this one enabled already. I'm going to go to Tools, Real-Time, Job Dictionary from Word List. And I'm actually going to use this one that Keith prepared, which is, I'm going to call this Keith Test 1 and create a dictionary. And then I'm going to go to, on my desktop, I have this auto job analysis file that Keith created. And it's going to make a whole bunch of dictionary entries for a whole bunch of words. So Keith has been going through this feature with a fine-tooth comb and looking at every little detail about how it's making these dictionary entries. So the auto job dictionary feature takes a list of words and basically comes up with every possible way those words could be written. Keith specifically made some extremely multisyllabic words here just to get it to come up with a lot of entries. But there's a lot here, and we've been going through this over and over and over again, looking at how to both narrow down the number of entries it creates, but also make sure it hits every possible note of what's in Keith's theory. And as you can see, this is doing a ton of work. The idea here being that if you run the auto job dictionary feature, you should be able to basically run this feature on a list of words, and then, you know what, just don't even look at this dictionary. Just forget it's here. Just close it and don't think about it. Because the idea is that no matter what way you write the word, it's going to come out correct. So it doesn't actually matter that some of these, quite many of them, are going to be ways you don't write the word, which is fine. Like Australians, for example, right? If I look at all the different ways it came up to write Australians, it came up with some with AU, some with OU, and some with dropping the first vowel entirely. So it doesn't matter which way you would write it, it should get it. And since this is a job dictionary, which is just going to get thrown away after the job is over anyway, it doesn't matter that it's creating, 2,000 dictionary entries for 200 words. That's fine. These are disposable. Anyway, I wanted to bring this up because I think it's potentially going to make the process of building job dictionaries super fast. Between that and using analyzed documents to actually find the lists of words for you, dictionary prep could go from taking 2 hours to taking 10 minutes for a particular job.
This is pretty exciting. I'm really happy to see this in action, and I really can't imagine how much work you and Keith have both put into this.
Oh, many hours. And all of that, by the way, and this is why we put this in the video, is because a lot of the work we've been doing is to tune up the steno theory part of it. But I've pointed out to Keith, I said, I want to get this working as cleanly as we can for you. But as we do this, please make some notes in here about how many of the things we're adding are general steno theory things and how many of them are Keithisms. Because you'll look, this word to steno list here, this is how to take any word in the English language and figure out all the different ways the steno could be written. A great many of these are Keithisms. Now, a great many of them are very standard. Like, the long E sound is AOE, generally speaking. There's nothing, that's unambiguous. Some things are much less clear cut. Like, here's the individual letters. That's pretty straightforward. But if we go, we can see there's a bunch of endings. Now, most people use GS for ings or for shun. You can see here we've got the, unction is PBGS, for example. So a lot of those things, and here's the general TION or SION or SIOUS, etc. Here's the Asian variations, here's the shun variations. A lot of that pretty standard steno theory. But up here, we have some prefixes. Now, not everybody would write neuro this way. Not everybody would write counter or hyper or anti. Like, that's Keith's specific stroke for the anti-prefix. So any word that starts with ANTE or ANTI, he would always write this at the beginning of it. So I bring this up because in order for this feature to work perfectly for any user, they're going to have to start with knowing that this knows standard steno theory, but if you have special ways you write things, this will have to be tuned and customized for you personally, for your personal writing style. Now, we are absolutely 100% willing to help do that in exactly the same way we can help you build your phonetics table in Eclipse. It's just that the phonetics table is the opposite of this. The phonetics table says, based on this steno, what would it sound like? And this is the precise opposite. This is based on this spelling of a word. Here's what the steno would be. So we had to basically do an inverse phonetics table to make this work. But as you can see, it does work. It builds a giant dictionary for you and saves you potentially a ton of manual effort.
Excellent. I think that wraps up all of the other issues and concerns that were brought to us at NCRA. And so I wanted to, first of all, thank you, Jeremy, for your time and joining me for this video. I also wanted to give a special thanks to Keith Vincent. His help both in development and at the conference itself has always been invaluable. And so I just wanted to thank him for coming, and I want to thank all of our users for coming every year and supporting us and visiting with us. It was so nice to see so many friendly faces yet again.
The main thing I would say is keep the suggestions coming, keep the feedback coming.
Okay.
Eclipse evolves due to user feedback, people's ideas, and all the things people want to see a piece of software do. If they tell us, then we get it into the software, and then the plugin system makes it possible to do that with a speed that we've never been able to do before.
Absolutely. And thank you again so much for your time, Jeremy, and for appearing on the YouTube page for the first time ever and taking this time to demonstrate the development process for everyone. And please don't ever hesitate to reach out to support or myself if you have a question or feature request. Thank you so much to all of our viewers for checking out this video. And don't forget that Advantage Software offers anytime support. Tech support can be reached with any question anytime, including weekends and holidays, at 772-288-3266. Email support is also available at support@eclipsecat.com.